It may be rather frustrating, aggravating, and bothersome to deal with a persistently itching nose and chronic sneezing, especially when it seems to be the cause of incessant sneezing fits. Robbie was in a seemingly unbreakable loop of agony, with each sneeze wearing him out. His nose felt itchier the more he sneezed, and the more he smeed, the itchier it felt. Robbie was exhausted and annoyed by the endless cycle. Robbie, 38, from New York, found this to be a major annoyance that had taken over his life. What had begun as a sporadic irritation developed into a welcome, ongoing companion. Whether he was among friends, at home, or at work, made no difference. The sneezes came uninvited, disrupting his day, sometimes to the point of embarrassment. His nose, far from feeling merely irritated, felt like it was on fire. The itch was not just a minor tickle, but an overwhelming, unbearable sensation that he couldn't escape. It was so intense that, in his more desperate moments, Robbie found himself fantasizing about what it would be like to detach his nose entirely, anything to stop the maddening irritation. Initially, Robbie brushed off his symptoms as a seasonal issue, attributing the constant sneezing and itching to allergies or perhaps hay fever. After all, he lived in a city not notorious for its pollen and airborne irritants. But as the problem persisted, Robbie's suspicions began to shift. Yet he was reluctant to seek help. He had always been a bit stubborn, especially when it came to health matters, and the idea of consulting a doctor over something as seemingly trivial as sneezing felt unnecessary. Reflecting on this period, Robbie admitted with a rude smile, "I always thought, why bother seeing a doctor just for sneezing? What's a doctor going to do besides? Hand me a box of tissues and tell me to blow my nose? It just didn't seem worth it. I didn't want to waste anyone's time over something so small and silly." Robbie's reluctance to seek medical attention was not just about stubbornness. It was rooted in a deeper fear. Since childhood, he had been uncomfortable with medical visits, a fear he could never quite shake off, even in adulthood. He remembered all too vividly the cold, sterile rooms, the sharp smell of antiseptic, and the feeling of helplessness that came with being a small child in a doctor's office. These memories had left him with a deep-seated aversion to medical environments, so much so that he often chose to endure illnesses rather than face the anxiety of a checkup. In his mind, seeing a doctor for something like sneezing felt almost irrational, a minor inconvenience that didn't warrant the stress it would bring. But as the days turned into weeks and then months, the sneezing and itching didn't just linger, they worsened. His nose felt perpetually inflamed, and the sneezing fits became longer and more intense, hitting him at the most inconvenient times and leaving him feeling exhausted each day was a battle against his own body. And yet the worse his symptoms became, the more Robbie doubled down on his decision to ignore them. He would tell himself that it would eventually go away, that his body would adjust, that he would find some relief if he just waited long enough. It became a kind of grim routine, with him convincing himself every morning that this would be the day the sneezing stopped. But the relief never came, and still Robbie refused to seek help. Holding out against all logic, his determination to wait it out became almost a point of pride, a stubborn defiance in the face of his worsening condition. Fear, pride, and a desire to avoid medical settings had all combined to keep him trapped in this cycle of suffering, and he carried on hoping against hope that the problem would resolve itself without the need for a doctor's intervention. Over time, the constant itching and relentless sneezing became so ingrained in Robbie's daily routine that he barely noticed how much they disrupted his life. He had learned to live with these irritations, chalking them up as minor nuisances in the grand scheme of things. After all, he reasoned, There were far worse health problems out there, and if sneezing was the price he had to pay, then so be it. He had resigned himself to this daily discomfort, assuming it was just his body's odd way of reacting to the world. Yet despite his attempts to downplay the severity of his symptoms, the reality was beginning to catch up with him. What Robbie did not know was that the underlying cause of his misery was on the verge of being revealed. His condition, however, started to interfere with the one aspect of his life. He had always taken the most pride in his job as a chef at one of New York City's most prestigious five-star restaurants. Robbie was used to operating in a high-press environment, cooking meals for celebrities, influential figures, and the city's elite. It was a demanding job that required focus, precision, and above all, adherence to strict hygiene standards. In the food service industry, cleanliness is non-negotiable, and any risk of contamination is treated with the utmost seriousness. But Robbie's persistent sneezing and the ever-present itchiness in his nose were making it increasingly difficult for him to meet those standards. No matter how careful he tried to be, the threat of spreading germs to the delicate dishes he crafted was becoming impossible to ignore. He would stifle sneezes with a tissue hidden discreetly in his pocket, excuse himself for frequent breaks to wash his hands, and even wore a mask on particular bad days, hoping it would act as a barrier. Yet as time went on, his efforts to hide his symptoms weren't enough. The other staff began to notice his constant sniffling, and whispers about his condition circulated among his colleagues. It was only a matter of time before the restaurant owner, who had always valued Robbie's dedication and culinary skill, had to step in the decision. While difficult was necessary, he hadn't lost his job, and it was a relatively slow week. The owner explained sympathetically, "But we couldn't risk compromising our customers' health. We advised him to see a doctor and get a thorough checkup before returning to work." Robbie was devastated, but he understood the reasoning. He left the restaurant feeling defeated. Yet now there was no way to avoid what he had been dreading for so long: a visit to the doctor. When the day of the appointment finally arrived, Robbie's anxiety had reached its peak. Every second spent in the clinic's waiting room felt like an eternity, and he couldn't stop his mind from spiraling into worst-case scenarios. He fidgeted restlessly, picking at the edges of the health pamphlet he had picked up to distract himself, though he hardly saw the words on the page. His thoughts were running wild, cycling through all the possible explanations for his symptoms, some rational, others bordering on the absurd. Was it an obscure allergy, a strange infection, or something more serious that he couldn't even bring himself to name? Soon enough, his name was called, and he was ushered into the doctor's office, with a nervous knot tightening in his stomach. Robbie began recounting his months of misery, the endless sneezing, the unrelenting itch, and the toll it had taken on his life. The doctor, a kind and experienced professional with a calming demeanor, listened without interruption. He nodded thoughtfully as Robbie described his symptoms, his calm and attentive manner easing Robbie's anxiety, if only slightly. "I understand how frustrating this must be," the doctor said, his tone gentle yet firm. He assured Robbie that they would get to the bottom of it together, promising that no matter the cause, there was a solution to be found. He proposed post-examining Robbie's nose with a specialized instrument to determine if there were any underlying problems. As he inspected the nasal entry, no clear signs of irritation or similar issues were evident, the doctor recalled from the checkup. Normally, you would expect to find some foreign body causing irritation and leading to the symptoms, he noted. But everything appeared normal. The doctor suspected that Robbie's severe itching and sneezing might be due to acute hay fever or a reaction to the polluted air of New York. He prescribed a potent antihistamine for Robbie and advised him to return if his condition did not improve within a week. Unbeknownst to the doctor, the real cause was both surprising and serious, and it was not something that could be remedied with antihistamines. As a result, Robbie's condition did not improve. Instead, it deteriorated. The persistent itching and sneezing disrupted his sleep, severely affecting his daily life due to constant fatigue. A week later, Robbie found himself back in the doctor's office just as anxious as before. Upon re-examining Robbie's nose, the doctor was perplexed. There were no new findings, and everything appeared suspiciously normal. Once again, he even consulted a colleague for a second opinion, despite no apparent issues. Initially, the doctors opted for a thorough examination of Robbie's nasal cavity, which was too dark and narrow to inspect visually. Consequently, they scheduled a CT scan for him, a sophisticated imaging procedure known as computed tomography, designed to capture intricate internal images. This scan was expected to uncover any hidden anomalies. Several days later, Robbie arrived at the hospital for his scan. He positioned himself on the machine's bed and was moved into the cylindrical scanner, where he remained motionless throughout the painless procedure. During the scan, Robbie noticed the tech Ian's expression changed drastically as images began to display on the screen, her face reflecting growing astonishment and disbelief, with his heart racing and anxiety mounting. Robbie could only speculate about what had alarmed the technician so profoundly. After the scan, the still shaken technician dismissed him, advising that his results would follow in a few days. Leaving the hospital, Robbie was still plagued by the same symptoms of itchiness and sneezing. All Robbie could do was wait anxiously, haunted by the memory of the technician's alarmed expression, imagining the worst possible scenarios. The anticipation was agonizing. Fortunately, the wait was shorter than expected. The very next day, Robbie received a call from his doctor, inviting him to disk the results. Sitting in the doctor's office, Robbie was met with a look of both concern and confusion from his doctor. After a thorough examination of the CT scan results, a deep exhale, and an announcement of the unexpected findings followed. Robbie was discovered to have a tooth embedded deep within his nasal cavity. As the tooth expanded, it stimulated the delicate hairs and irritated the nasal lining. This anomaly, hidden too far for direct observation, was the culprit behind his relentless itching and frequent sneezing. Both Robbie and the medical team were astonished by the discovery. Uniquely, the tooth was oriented upwards towards the skull, contrary to its normal downward growth. Fortunately, the medical team had a plan. They could surgically remove the tooth from Robbie's nasal passage. Though the procedure was straightforward, It promised significant relief. By this point, Robbie, overwhelmed by constant discomfort, eagerly consented to the operation. The very next day, the surgery was successfully performed, removing the tooth and its root, which measured 30. The surgical site was then cauterized to prevent further issues. Robbie's relief was immense, summarizing the ordeal as a major disruption over a minor oddity. Weeks later, he reflected on the bizarre nature of his condition, comparing it to a plot from a Stephen King novel. With the sneezing and itching resolved, he regained his normal sleep patterns and returned to work, and even overcame his apprehension towards medical visits. After watching the story above, do you have any thoughts?